Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is Thursday night, the last night of Chanukkah, also known as Zois, referred to as Zois Chanukkah, an expression taken from the Torah reading that we read tomorrow morning on the last day. And thank you for joining us for our final Shiur about Chanukkah. The Shiur is, of course, Leiluy Nishmat, Daniella, Shaina, Aleha Hashalom, Bas Yehoshua, Falik, Shiur, where Nishmat should have an Aliyah. Allah Yidin Ayashia, the Kranka Rafid, the Gazinta Ayashia. Everybody should be blessed, and all of our requests should be fulfilled. The great spiritual rabbis have taught us that the 8th night and the 8th day of Chanukkah is a very spiritually powerful time. It's an auspicious time. The things we ask of Hashem for on this particular day have great power for them to be fulfilled. So, somebody wrote, this is not the last night. It is the last night of Chanukkah, to the best of my knowledge. Anyways, all the things that we ask of Hashem should be fulfilled. Brachas and Simchas and Nachas and Gesund and Yishuv and Archavas Adas for Klal Yisrael and for all of us and for all Jews, and everybody around the world should be safe and should be healthy, and things should go good for all Jews everywhere. Okay, we have been studying some passages from the Talmud about the Yom Tov of Chanukkah and some of, by extension, some of what these things, some of what these passages mean. Tonight, I want to study with you together something that the Talmud dedicates actually a couple of pages to in its discussion about Chanukkah, and specifically about the mitzvah of lighting the Chanukkah candles. The discussion seems typical for a Talmudic discussion in that it seems technical, it seems sort of like, it seems like a minutia. It seems something that is, significant sort of on a very technical legal level. I want to at least briefly discuss some of the technicalities and the legalities of this discussion with you, because it goes on in the Talmudic passage on Chanukkah for a couple of pages. And then with Hashem's help to discuss what this could mean in a spiritual sense, in a moral sense, and in an inspirational sense. So we can take something from it as we conclude the Yom Tov of Chanukkah and go into the rest of the year. Okay, excuse me. When it comes to the mitzvah of lighting the Chanukkah candles, so none of us seem to struggle with knowing how to fulfill the mitzvah or knowing what the mitzvah is. It doesn't seem complicated at all. We set up our menorahs, and in the case of tonight, we set up 8 candles. We grab a shamash, we grab an extra candle, we light the extra candle, we light the shamash, we make the bracha, the blessings, the brachas, the mitzvahs of tzivonu, l'hadlik ner Chanukah, and she'asa nisim la'avesenu b'yom me'imit manazeh, and we light them, and we sing a ner salolu, and we sing mois tzur, and we give Chanukah gelt, don't forget the Chanukah gelt, and we eat latkes, and we eat hamantashen, and all the rest of it. But the Talmud is not happy with that. The Gemara wants to split the hair and know exactly what is really the mitzvah of Chanukah candles. Says the Talmud, there are 2 ways of understanding this. I'm going to give you the Talmudic terms, and I'll try with Hashem's help to explain what is the question here. The Talmud says, is it hadloka oisa mitzvah, or is it hanocha oisa mitzvah? Is it the actual lighting of the candles that does the mitzvah, or is it the placing of the menorah that does the mitzvah? Which one is it? Well, what's the Talmud asking? What are the 2 options? On a simple level, again, skipping over many fine details of this, but on a simple level, that what the Talmud is asking is the mitzvah to actually light the menorah, or is it sufficient to simply put down an already lit menorah? Is it necessary for there to be an actual act of kindling? Or if I take already kindled candles and I put them down by my window, by my door, on my table, wherever it is that I put down my Chanukah menorah, and I put it down for the sake of the Chanukah candles, is that sufficient as well? Or do I need to actually light? Or in different words, maybe better words, the Talmud is asking, is it necessary to light a menorah? Or is it sufficient to have an already lit menorah? Is it the act of lighting the menorah that's the mitzvah? Or is the mitzvah the reaction? Is the mitzvah the passive reality that there are candles burning? There are candles burning which are present. Is that sufficient to do the mitzvah? Which one is it? Well, what's the difference? When you light the candles burn. When you don't light the candles don't burn. It turns out that there are actually many, many differences. I'll give you a few, some of them perhaps more practical than you may have realized. The Talmudic example, the one that Talmud works with, is okay, not a very practical one, but nevertheless, the one that was very practical in the Talmudic days. The example that Talmud works with is this. The Talmud says, look, in those days, you have to understand, in those days, they didn't have electricity, of course. It wasn't discovered yet. So how did they illuminate their homes throughout the year? How did they illuminate their homes on any night of the year? How did they illuminate their homes on any day of the year if it was a dark day, if it was in the middle of the winter? What did they do? They used candles. They always used candles. So what the Talmud is really saying is, what if a person already has a candelabra in their home with candles in it and the candles are already lit? Let's say the individual lit these candles in the morning because it was an overcast day. Or they just lit them in the morning because that was part of how they decorated their homes. They decorated their homes with candles, with lit candles, because the candles would add light. And it was considered a sign of wealth, by the way, and a sign of affluence, and a sign of prominence to have lit candles around in one's home. The wealthier one was, the more one could afford it, the more one would have lit candles. The more it was a sign of prominence and affluence. So what if I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I already have lit candles all around my house, and the candles have been burning all day, and now it's the fourth night of Chanukkah? The Gemara says, now it's time for me to do the mitzvah of lighting the Chanukkah candles. Question, what's the mitzvah? Hadlaka oisa mitzvah or hanocha oisa mitzvah? If I say hanocha oisa mitzvah, then I don't have to relight candles. I don't have to light new candles. I can simply take candles, if it's the fourth night of Chanukkah, and go around my house, take 4 lit candles, put them in one place on my table, by my window, by my door, by my front door, or wherever it is that I light the Chanukkah candles. I can put the candles down and make the bracha. True, I'm not lighting them right now. They've been lit since the morning, but I have them and they're here and they've been lit, they've been ignited, and they're burning. And they'll burn for many hours to come. If you say hanocha is the mitzvah is to put down the candles. If the mitzvah is to put down the candles, then as soon as I put them down, I fulfill the mitzvah, even if I didn't light them because they were already lit. On the other hand, if I say hadloka oisa mitzvah, hadloka oisa mitzvah means the mitzvah is to light the candles. I have to actually ignite them. To take candles that were already ignited before, even if I reposition them, even if I realign them, I would not fulfill the mitzvah. Because I'm not lighting candles right now. According to this way of understanding, if I say hadloka oisa mitzvah, if I have candles lit all over my house, I cannot fulfill the mitzvah by gathering these candles and arranging them and putting them down in the right place. I cannot fulfill the mitzvah that way. If I want to use those candles, I may, but what I'd have to do is I'd have to actually extinguish them, gather them together, put them all in the right place, and then relight them all. And after I've made a bracha, after I've made a blessing, and do the act of igniting, of lighting these candles, so that I can fulfill the mitzvah of lighting the Chanukkah candles, hadlaka oisa mitzvah. Okay. That is, at least in the Talmudic sense, that's the way the Gemara presents it. Which one is it? The Gemara says, is it hadlaka oisa mitzvah? Is the mitzvah the actual lighting? Or is it sufficient to just put down the candles in the right place, even if they've already been lit? Okay. Let's give a couple of other examples. Practical, I'll give you one very, very practical example of this. We all know that the Chanukkah candles have to remain lit. They have to burn for 30 minutes after nightfall. Okay, so nightfall on a night like tonight is approximately 5:15 p.m. The Chanukkah candles have to remain lit from 5:15 roughly till 5:45, or whenever you light them, they have to burn for 30 minutes. Okay. What if I take a candle and I light the candle, but at the time that I light it, it doesn't have enough wicks, it doesn't have enough wax, or it doesn't have enough oil to last a full 30 minutes. There isn't enough wax there. There isn't enough oil in the cup to burn for 30 minutes. There's only enough oil to burn for 20 minutes. I light the candle anyways. And then I go and I get more oil after the candle's lit, and I add more oil into the already lit candle. Now the candle will burn for the full 30 minutes. It's just that at the time that I lit the candle, there wasn't a sufficient amount of oil present at the moment of the lighting. Is that kosher? Is that okay? Or do I need to insist that at the time of the lighting of the candle, there is already at the moment of the ignition, there is already sufficient fuel to keep the menorah burning for the full 30 minutes that is halachically necessary? Again, the question, is it necessary? Must I insist that at the time of the ignition, at the time of the lighting, there is a full 30 minutes worth of fuel so that the candles burn for the sufficient amount of time? Or can I light the candles even without sufficient amount of fuel and add more fuel as the candles burn? What's the halacha? The Gemara says this halacha will depend on the same question, which is, what is the mitzvah of the lighting of the candles? Is it the act of lighting? Or is it simply hanocha oisa mitzvah, the fact that I put down burning candles? It depends on the same thing. You see, if the mitzvah is the actual igniting of the candles, if the mitzvah is the actual lighting of the candles, the ignition, if the ignition is the mitzvah, then at the time that I do the ignition, at the time that I do the mitzvah, all necessary criteria must be present at the moment of the ignition. So at the moment of the lighting of the candles, I must already have sufficient fuel for the candle to burn for the full amount of time that it needs to burn. Don't tell me I'm going to bring more fuel later, I'm going to add more oil, I'm going to add more. No, not good enough. Hadlaka oisa mitzvah means the crucial moment is the moment of the ignition. So at the time that I light it, I must make sure I have the sufficient amount of fuel there present. On the other hand, if I say hanocha oisa mitzvah, it's sufficient to put down candles, what that means is we don't care, according to that way of seeing it, we don't care about the moment of ignition. We don't care about the moment that it's actually being lighted. We care that the candles burn for the sufficient amount of time. So even if you had to add oil in the middle, even if you have to add more fuel in the middle, that's fine too, as long as in the end the candles burn for the right amount of time. I'll give you a third example. I'll give you a third practical repercussion from this question. What if I light my menorah? What if I light it at the right time? What if I light it in the right place? What if I light it? I do everything right. And then 5 minutes after I light it, something happens. The menorah goes out. Somebody walked by, accidentally tipped the menorah. The whole thing fell. Something happened. I don't know what. An unexpected wind came along, knocked the menorah over. Boom. Somebody was passing somebody else a donut. They tossed it to them. Boom, hit the menorah. The whole thing goes flying. All the candles go out. Do I need to relight the candles or not? Now, there's no harm in relighting the candles, of course, after you clean up the giant mess that it made. There's no prohibition in relighting the candles, of course. That's not a problem. But the question is, am I obligated to relight the candles? Or in even better words, when I relight the candles, do I have to make another bracha? Again, here's my question. I lit the menorah at the right time. I lit the menorah in the right place. I lit the menorah with the right amount of oil. Everything was kosher v'yosher, 100% fine. A couple of minutes after I lit it, trach, something happens. My menorah goes flying. Everything goes flying in different directions. All the candles go out. Okay. There's definitely no harm in relighting the menorah. Of course, you can relight the menorah, no problem. But the question is, am I obligated to relight the menorah? And an even better question is, do I make another blessing? Do I make another bracha when I relight the menorah? Do I say, listen, I lit the menorah, I did the mitzvah. The mitzvah was done. The candles were supposed to burn for 30 minutes. Something happened, bam, the menorah went flying. Okay, but the mitzvah was done. I'll relight the menorah, but I'm not obligated to relight the menorah, and I definitely don't make another bracha. Or do I say no? Bottom line, your menorah didn't burn for half hour. Bottom line, the candles went out after 5 minutes. Something unexpected. We cannot hold you responsible. Okay, of course. Something happened. But bottom line, they didn't burn. So relight them. You're obligated to relight them, and you have to make another blessing. Which one is it? Says the Gemara. Same question. Same discussion. The question again boils down to what's the actual mitzvah? This is a piece of Gemara, my friends. The question is, what's the mitzvah? Is it hadloka oisa mitzvah, or is it anocha oisa mitzvah? Is it the actual ignition of the menorah that's the mitzvah, or is it the burning of the candles that's the mitzvah? If I say the mitzvah is to light the candles, then once I've lit the candles, and once I've lit it correctly, and once I've lit it in the right place and at the right time with sufficient amount of fuel, I've done the mitzvah. And if something after that, beyond expectation, out of the norm happens to knock the menorah over, I can relight the menorah if I want, but I don't have to. And definitely there's no new bracha, there's no new blessing on relighting the menorah. The mitzvah was already done. I lit the menorah in a kosher way. That's if I say hadloka oisa mitzvah. But if I say hanocha oisa mitzvah, if I say the mitzvah is not the igniting, the mitzvah is the burning of the candles, then the candles need to burn for 30 minutes. And until the candles burn for 30 minutes after nightfall, you have not fulfilled the mitzvah. Don't tell me I lit the menorah in a kosher way. I don't care if you lit the menorah in a kosher way. Bottom line, they didn't burn. So in that case, you would relight the menorah and you would make a bracha, so that you can fulfill the mitzvah in a kosher way. All right, very practical example. Very practical example. Can I use electric lights for the menorah? Can I use battery-operated lights for the menorah? Now, it's not for this particular discussion right now. I just want to mention that this issue, this halacha, is confusing to people because for a menorah, you actually may not. The end of the discussion is that for a menorah, you may not use electric lights or battery-operated lights. You don't fulfill the mitzvah that way. The reason why I say it's confusing to people is because Shabbos candles are different. Shabbos candles, actually, you can fulfill the mitzvah with electric lights, if necessary. You can fulfill the mitzvah with battery-operated lights. Almost every week, without fail, I'll get a call from some woman somewhere on Friday afternoon who will, or from some family on Friday afternoon who will say, Rabbi, what do we do? We're stuck in the hospital for Shabbos. Please, God, people should only be in the hospital for good reasons, for having babies and stuff like that. But they say, Rabbi, I'm stuck here in the hospital. What do I do? Excuse me. What do I do about Shabbos candles? Well, if you're stuck and you have nothing else, you can use the electric lights in the room that you're in as your Shabbos lights. Well, how do I do that? Simple, exactly as you would in your home if you were using fire. Turn off the lights, turn them back on, wave your hands, cover your eyes, make the bracha, say good Shabbos. Shabbos candles don't have to be made of fire. In fact, in many hospitals where they have, where they have Bikur Cholim rooms, where they have resources from people who are spending Shabbos and Yom Tov in the hospital, they actually have plug-in lights, which you literally plug into the wall, switch them on, make a bracha l'adlik ner shel Shabbos or shel Yom Tov. Those are even better because you don't have to turn them off. Right? If it's the lights in your room, then when it's time to go to sleep, you're going to have somebody turn the lights off. You're going to have a guy turn the lights off for you. But the plug-in lights can burn as long as they burn. What about Chanukkah? Can I use plug-in lights? Can I use electric lights for Chanukkah candles? Once again, it comes down to the same question. What's the mitzvah? Is the mitzvah the lighting of the candles, or is the mitzvah the burning of the candles? If the mitzvah is the lighting of the candles, then at the time of the lighting, there needs to be sufficient fuel present in order to keep this candle burning for 30 minutes, in order to keep this thing burning for 30 minutes. In the case of electric lights, if I light an electric light right now, I don't have fuel right here to keep this electric candle, keep this thing burning for 30 minutes. The electricity is going to keep running through. It's going to keep coming through the wire. It's going to keep coming through the battery. It's going to keep coming in, but it isn't already here. Hadlaka Oisa Mitzvah means that at the time that I light the menorah, at the time that I light the candles, I have to already have the fuel present for it to burn for 30 minutes, at least 30 minutes after nightfall. Or do I say no? As long as it burns, it burns. The Talmud discusses this for 3 pages, back and forth, bringing proofs one way or the other. In the end, the Talmud settles it in the most simple and direct of ways. The Talmud says, well, why don't you just look at the bracha? Why don't you look at the blessing that people actually make when they light the menorah? What do we say? As we hold that shamash and we're about to do the mitzvah, we say, blessed are you, Hashem, Elokeinu, our God, Melech Olam, the King of the world, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvos, who has sanctified us, who has made us holy with his mitzvahs, V'tzivonu, and commanded us to do what? Lahadlik. Lahadlik ner shel Chanukkah means that the mitzvah is to ignite. That the mitzvah is to light. The mitzvah is the actual act of ignition. That's the mitzvah. And therefore, at the time of the ignition, the menorah has to be lit with sufficient fuel, and it has to be lit in the right place, right? That's why you probably know the halacha is you're not allowed to move the menorah after you light it until it's burned for the right amount of time. You're not allowed to. Why? Because we're concerned that a person will say to themselves, you know what? Let me light the menorah here, and then when it's done, I'll move it there. No, you can't do that. You have to light the menorah. The actual act of lighting, the ignition, has to be done in the right place. In the kosher place. It has to be done at the right height, in the right place in the house, etc., etc. The Gemara says, look, the bracha itself tells you that the mitzvah is lahadlik, the mitzvah is to light, the ignition, the act of ignition, that itself is the mitzvah. And with this, the Talmud basically settles the discussion, and this becomes the halacha. In a case, practically, where a person's menorah went out, right? Something happened, your child or your grandchild or your nephew or your niece, or you yourself knocked the menorah over, you would relight the menorah, but no bracha is made. Once the menorah has been lit, it's been lit, and the mitzvah has been done. This is what the Gemara explains, 2 ways of understanding with regard to the mitzvah of lighting the menorah that we do every night of Chanukkah. Okay. There is, of course, tremendous spiritual significance. There is, of course, tremendous meaning, moral and ethical and depth to this Talmudic discussion. What's the Gemara asking? The mitzvah is to put down the menorah, the mitzvah is to light the menorah. There's, of course, tremendous wisdom here. There's a great, beautiful debate going on here in terms of what is the most important part when it comes to the menorah. Okay, of course we understand that when we light the menorah, we're not just lighting physical flames. We're not just igniting fire, for the sake of lighting a physical fire. The fire represents the neshama. The fire represents that Jewish soul, that Jewish spirit that's been burning for 3,500 years, that the Maccabees managed to reignite and rededicate in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, that they fought for against the Greeks, that they persevered for, that they miraculously discovered in the Beis Hamikdash in purity, that they had the courage to even search for, as we discussed 2 weeks ago. Of course, the menorah is meant to be understood not just as a physical flame, but as a spiritual flame as well. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe said, he had a way of expressing things. He said, when he sits next to the menorah, he told people, when you sit next to the menorah, you have to listen to the story that the Chanukkah candles are telling. Every Chanukkah candle tells a story. You have to listen to the story that the Chanukkah candles relate. The Chanukkah candles tell a story of Jewish survival, of Jewish perseverance, and more than anything, like the name Chanukkah itself suggests, the Chanukkah candles tell a story of chinuch, of education, and of how to pass the torch and how to pass the flame on to the next generation. How to perpetuate our past. What do we do? Every year we ask ourselves, what do we do to light the Chanukkah menorah? in the reality, in the world that we live in today, because the world constantly changes. And the political and the social and the economic and the geographic and all of these things are constantly changing, but the Chanukah Menorah doesn't change. It's got to find the message has got to find, the message of the Chanukah Menorah has got to find a way to make itself relevant every single year. Okay. So how do we, my dear friends, communicate a 2,000-year-old mitzvah to a new generation? How do we communicate a 3,500-year-old Torah to a new world? How do we take the values and the Torah that the mitzvahs that the Jewish people have fulfilled for thousands of years? What's the most important part of bringing them into today's world? What's the most important criteria in lighting the Chanukah Menorah? 2 thoughts, 2 opinions, 2 perspectives. One opinion says, Hanocha Oisa Mitzvah. You know what Hanocha Oisa Mitzvah means? It means you have to put down today. You have to put down here. You have to put down in this world, in this reality, the same Chanukah Menorah that they lit in the past. We have to sit our kids down. We have to sit ourselves down. We have to sit our kids down and teach them history. We have to tell them where we came from. We have to tell them the truth about our lives and our people and what it is that we went through and what we fought for and what it is that we came through in order to be here today. Hanocha Oisa Mitzvah says, put down the menorah from the past. Put it down in today's present, in today's day and age, and tell the people what it's all about. Celebrate the same menorah that we did in the past. That's Hanocha Oisa Mitzvah. Hanocha Oisa Mitzvah says, bring it. Bring all the beauty and all the majesty and all the glory that the Jewish people celebrated and sacrificed so much for and paid with their lives for. Bring it in today's day and age. Put it down. Talk to the people. Talk to the children. Remember ourselves, the stories of Chanukah and all it represents. That's one. Number two says, Hadlaka Oisa Mitzvah. Hadlaka Oisa Mitzvah says, it's not enough to bring the fire from the past. You have to light a new fire today. Hadlaka Oisa Mitzvah says, it's not sufficient to talk to me about the way the Chanukah Menorah burned last year and the year before and 100 years ago and 500 years ago. Hadlaka Oisa Mitzvah, light a new candle today. Don't reinvent the mitzvah. Don't reinvent the religion. But find a way to make something burn that has never burned before. 2 perspectives. I dare say, this is probably one of the many ways of spiritually explaining the most famous argument in all of, or one of the most famous arguments in all of the Gemara between the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel. Once again, with regard to the lighting of the menorah. The school of Shammai says, on the first night you light 8 candles. On the second night 7, on the third night 6, on the fourth night 5, etc. Until the last night you light 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's how you light the menorah, says the school of Shammai. The school of Hillel says exactly the other way around. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Why? All right, the Talmud gives different explanations. Shammai says, the school of Shammai says, the most important thing are how many days of Chanukah are coming up. Hillel says the most important, how many days of Chanukah passed, right? Shammai says, you got to go like the bulls that were brought in the temple on Sukkot, where they went down 13, 12, 11, 10. Hillel says you always got to go up in holiness. You always got to add more, etc., etc. Beautiful. What are they really arguing over? What does the argument really mean? The school of Shammai says we have to talk to people about Jewish history. We have to talk to people about Judaism. We have to start off with an 8. We have to tell them once upon a time. Oh boy, there was a Beis HaMikdash. There was a Moshe Rabbeinu. There was a Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. There was a Rambam. There were real Jews. They were authentic Jews. They practiced Judaism. They sacrificed for it. They lived as Yidden. They burned with the fire of Torah. And from there, gradually, it went down. Each generation takes as much as they can from the generation before them, but never the full picture. It starts off with an 8, but from there it goes to a 7 and a 6 and a 5. Until the end, all you're left with is one of the original 8 candles. And as long as you can hold on to one of those 8 candles, as long as you can fight so that one candle will burn, you're still lighting the Menorah, you're still celebrating Chanukkah, and you're still connected to Jewish history, even if it's only one strand. That's the school of Shaina. They're 100% right, of course. With all the luxury of the United States of America, and with all the religious freedom that we have today, Klal Yisrael, the Jewish nation, does not produce today the same quality of scholars and the same quality of Jews that were produced in our previous history. Not even an iota, not even a fraction of what our people produced under the harshest and most painful of circumstances. We are in truth today but a 1 compared to the 8 of our ancestors. Beis Shammai says when it comes Chanukkah and we light the Menorah, tell your children the truth, we're nothing compared to our Zaydas and Bobas. We don't have a fraction of their authenticity. We don't have a fraction of their holiness. We can study about them. The most we can hope for is to hold on like a gartel, to hold on like a belt to what it is that they taught us and remember it all and not let go. Beis Shammai says 8765431. And Beis Hillel say no. You got to go the opposite. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's got to build and it's got to get higher and it's got to get stronger. What is Beis Hillel saying? We shouldn't remember our past? What is the school of Hillel saying? It's not important. Our ancestors were not greater than us. We are greater than them. God forbid. What Beis Hillel is saying is that that's not enough. It's not enough to simply remember, to simply perpetuate the past. It's not enough to bring the Chanukkah Menorah from last year or from last century or from 100 years ago, or from 1,000 years ago. It's beautiful, but it's not enough. Instead, Hadlaka oisa mitzvah, the ignition does the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to find a way to light the passion and the excitement and the enthusiasm in a way that it's never been stirred before. That's the mitzvah. Concludes the Gemara. Which way is the halacha? Look at the bracha that we make. As we make the bracha and we hold the shamash, we say, Hashem commanded us, gave us, sanctified us, gave us this incredible mitzvah of lahadlik, to light, to ignite, and to create something that wasn't there before, to make it relevant. You know, a teacher of mine used to say, the product has to, used to talk about education, used to say, the product has to stay the same, but the packaging always has to be fresh. Hadlaka oisa mitzvah means what happened in the past, what we have until now is beautiful. What we have until now needs to be guarded with everything we have. You see, if we don't know, this is the problem. The problem is, some people say, okay, let me just light a new candle and forget about what happened in the past. And that's not Chanukkah. That's not Judaism. Hadlaka oisa mitzvah says, take everything you have until now. Take the history that we have and the wealth of Torah that we have and all of everything, all the whole Jewish history, take all of it, take it all and use it to light one new candle. One more candle, one new year, one more menorah. And if you lit 7 candles last night, tonight you'll light 8. And you'll find one more opportunity to make it bigger and to make it stronger and to make it more relevant and to extend it one step further. Hadlaka oisa mitzvah means you have to light a new candle. It's about the ignition. Find something that wasn't lit before and light it. I've told you this before, but I have to repeat it. I read an article about a tennis coach. All of this particular tennis coach's students far surpassed their expectations. Under his tutelage, they did much better than anybody had anticipated. And they asked the coach, what's your secret? How come your students do so well under your care? And the coach said, you know why? Because I spend 80% of training time on my students' areas of strength and only 20% on their areas of weakness. 80% of the time, I take my students and I find what it is that they're good at. I find where is their area of strength, and I build it up, and I build it, and I build it, and I build it. The students themselves, said the tennis coach, turns out in the end had no idea how powerful they were. They had no idea how fantastic, how incredibly skilled players they knew they had areas of strength, but they didn't know how gifted and how great they were. They didn't know how powerful they were. Hadlaka Isa Mitzvah says we need to turn to every single Jew and we need to tell the Jew, you are more powerful than you have any idea. You are more infinite. You have more power than you yourself can anticipate. Go and light another candle. Go and bring more light into the world. Go generate and create more warmth with the gift that Hashem has given you. Go do something with it. Surprise yourself. You'll discover stuff within yourself that even you yourself didn't know. Not enough just to perpetuate. Of course, it's important, right? Anne Frank's father says, to prepare for the future, you have to know the past. If you don't know the past, then you're just a leaf floating around in the wind without an anchor, nothing. But once you have an anchor, and once you know your past, and once you know what it is that you stand for, and what it is that you believe in, and who you are, Hadlaka Isa Mitzvah, go light one more candle. Go light one more Jew. Go find one more Jew. Tap the Jew on the shoulder and say to them, Rabbi Yid, you are a Jew. Within you there is a soul, a Menorah that's waiting to be ignited. If we are passionate ourselves, then that passion will spread, it will overflow. It can be shared with others, and others who come in contact with us will also be inspired and ignited in this way. So as we conclude the Yom Tov of Chanukkah, and we lit a Chanukkah menorah with 8 candles, let's remember that Beis Hillel taught us that no matter what we did yesterday, tomorrow we got to do more. Let's remember that the school of Hillel taught us that we constantly have to grow. Mailin b'kodesh ve'ein moridin. We never back down. Only more, only higher, only greater. We only go up. We never go down. Let's remember that all of the gifts that Hashem has given us, all of the opportunities, all of the skills and the talents and everything, all the opportunities, everything Hashem has given us, has all been given to us for us here in this time and in this place to find one more yid or one more candle that needs to be lit, one more place where we can bring more warmth, and one more corner where we can bring more warmth. Sometimes in what seems to be the most insignificant ways. One Jew, one conversation, one moment, one nuance, one good morning, one hello, how are you? One little nothing where we ourselves think, what is this going to do, right? Imagine the Maccabees are in the Beis Hamikdash and they find one little jug of oil. One jug of oil. What's one jug of oil going to do? This jug of oil is burning 2,500 years later, and it's only getting stronger. And each year, Hadlaka Isa Mitzvah, we relight it, and we reinvent it, and it only gets stronger. They could have looked at the one little jug of oil and said, Nebach, poor thing. Who will ever remember that you even existed? Who will ever remember that you had any place in this world? Who will ever care that we found you? They had no idea what they found. What they found was the Yiddish neshama that has the ability to perpetuate, and as they say in Hollywood, to reinvent itself again and again, forever and never die. May Hashem help us that as we face a Chanukah this year, perhaps, at least in our memory, we've never faced before with these types of challenges. Baruch Hashem, May Hashem bless us that healing come to this world, and that success and nachas and gesund and all the most wonderful brachas come to this world. And as we grow every day in our lives, even as Chanukah ends, we carry the message of Chanukah with us. And the message is Hadlaka Oisa Mitzvah every day. We ask ourselves, how can I light inside myself a fire, a flame, an enthusiasm, a positive thought, a positive word, or a positive deed that I've never done before. And that will be my mitzvah today. May Hashem bless us all with tremendous success. Have a Chanukah Sameach, have a wonderful Shabbos, and please God, only simchas. Good night.